Warning. This is a true story. Viewer discretion is advised. The events you're about to hear are disturbing, unsettling, and not for the faint-hearted. Proceed at your own risk. It started as an innocent weekend getaway. A group of 5 friends, all experienced hikers, decided to venture deep into the dense woods of the Appalachian Mountains. They were seasoned campers, well prepared, and looking for an escape from their hectic lives. But little did they know, they were about to experience something they would never forget. A nightmare that would haunt them forever. The trip began like any other. They pitched their tents in a secluded part of the forest, far away from the usual trails. They had chosen this spot because it felt isolated, peaceful, perfect for a weekend retreat. As night fell, they sat around the campfire, telling stories, laughing, and enjoying the warmth. But something was off. There was an eerie silence in the air. No wind, no animals, not even the usual rustle of leaves. It felt unnatural, as if the entire forest was holding its breath. Around midnight, as the fire began to dwindle, they heard something. An odd sound, like a faint rustling in the bushes, but too soft to be an animal. One of the friends, Sarah, who had been sitting closest to the edge of the camp, whispered, "Did anyone else hear that?" Her voice trembled slightly, but the others dismissed it as just the wind. It wasn't until the sound came again, louder this time, that they all stood up in unison. The rustling was followed by what sounded like a low, guttural growl. A growl that no animal could make. It wasn't a bear or a wolf or anything they recognized. It was something otherworldly. Sarah felt her stomach churn. The hairs on her neck stood on end, and the group immediately fell into an eerie silence. No one dared speak. Then, without warning, the bushes parted. From the darkness, they saw something. Something tall and unnaturally thin, with long, twisted limbs and skin that appeared stretched and pale. It stood still, watching them, its head tilting slightly as if studying them like prey. The friends were paralyzed with fear. The creature's eyes, if you could even call them eyes, were black, hollow, and utterly devoid of any life or emotion. And in that moment, they realized they weren't alone in the woods. They weren't the only ones watching the fire flicker in the night. Panic set in as they grabbed their belongings, trying to scramble into their tents. But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that the creature had been waiting for them, watching them long before they had even arrived. The group spent the rest of the night huddled inside their tents, each of them barely able to sleep, their eyes wide open, fixed on the shadows outside. The growling didn't stop. It came in short, rhythmic bursts, always just out of sight. They could hear something moving, slowly, deliberately, circling their camp. The creature was waiting for them to make a mistake. Around 3 a.m., one of them, Jake, could no longer stand the tension. He decided to venture out to check on the fire. But as soon as he stepped out of the tent, the growl returned, louder and more menacing than before. It echoed through the woods, shaking the trees. Jake froze. His heart raced as he tried to comprehend what he was hearing. Then he saw it. The creature was closer now, much closer. Its bony fingers scraped the bark of a tree as it slowly moved toward him. Jake tried to scream, but no sound came out. His legs turned to jelly and he stumbled backward, tripping over the roots of the forest floor. The creature's head snapped toward him, its eyes gleaming with something like hunger. In a desperate attempt to flee, Jake scrambled back to the tent, shouting for his friends to wake up. But by the time he returned, the others were gone. His friends had disappeared. It was as though they had vanished into thin air, leaving only their belongings scattered around the campsite. The terror sank in. Jake was alone. Panic consumed him. He screamed their names, hoping for a response. But the only sound was the growl, now coming from all around him. The creature, whatever it was, had taken his friends. And Jake was next. In a frantic attempt to escape, Jake ran blindly through the woods. His breath came in ragged gasps as he stumbled over roots and branches, the growls following him like a nightmare he couldn't wake up from. He didn't know where he was going. He just needed to get away. As dawn broke, he found himself at the edge of a cliff. The forest was quiet now, but the silence was more suffocating than ever. Jake turned around to find the creature standing just a few feet behind him. It had no expression on its face, if it even had a face at all. It was the very embodiment of pure evil, and it was here to finish what it had started. With nowhere left to run, Jake did the unthinkable. He threw himself off the cliff, hoping the fall would end the nightmare. But it didn't. The last thing he remembered before everything went black was the sound of the creature's growl echoing through the trees, fading into the distance. When the rescue team arrived days later, they found Jake's body at the bottom of the cliff. There was no sign of the others, Sarah, Jake's friends, nothing. But there was something else. Something more disturbing. They found strange, twisted marks on the ground near the campsite, as if something had dragged the tents through the dirt. No animal tracks, no human footprints, just a trail of destruction. But the most chilling discovery of all came when they examined Jake's body. His eyes, like the others, were completely black. His face twisted in a permanent expression of terror. And the only thing that remained of the once cheerful group of friends was their gear, abandoned in the forest with no explanation. No one knows what happened to the others. Some say they were taken by something ancient that still roams the Appalachian wilderness. Others believe the creature was some sort of manifestation of evil that's been lurking there for centuries. But one thing is certain, they were never meant to leave those woods. So the next time you decide to go camping, remember the woods aren't always as empty as they seem. There are things out there watching, waiting, and they know when you're coming. You've been warned. Story 2. It was supposed to be a simple camping trip. 3 friends who had been best friends for years, eager to spend a weekend in the remote wilderness of the Cascade Range. They had planned this trip for months, excited to escape the hustle and bustle of their daily lives and reconnect with nature. They had hiked through forests and mountains countless times, but this time they decided to stray from the usual trails and camp deep in an area marked as unexplored on the map. The thrill of the unknown beckoned them, promising an adventure unlike any they had experienced before. It was supposed to be an adventure, a challenge. They were confident in their skills and eager to test their limits. But from the moment they stepped into the forest, an eerie silence seemed to whisper warnings. The forest was alive with unseen eyes, watching their every move, and the campers felt an inexplicable chill down their spines. They arrived late in the afternoon, the sun beginning to dip below the trees. The golden light cast long shadows, adding an eerie beauty to the surroundings. The air was crisp, the forest dense with towering pines and a heavy silence. The only sounds were the rustling of leaves and the occasional call of a distant bird. There were no other campers, no signs of human activity. It was as if they had stepped into a world untouched by time. They set up their tents and started a fire, sharing laughs and stories, feeling safe in the embrace of the wilderness. Little did they know, the true adventure was just beginning, and the forest had its own plans for them. But as the fire crackled and the night wore on, they noticed something unsettling. There was no sound. No crickets, no owls, no distant calls of coyotes. Just an eerie, suffocating silence that seemed to press in from all sides. The unsettling silence grew heavier, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. Shadows danced menacingly around the campfire, and the feeling of being watched intensified, making every rustle of leaves a potential threat. Around midnight, the stillness was broken by a distant, faint whisper that seemed to float on the wind. At first it was barely audible, like someone was speaking in a language they couldn't understand, a language that was foreign and ancient. Then, the whispering grew louder, closer, almost as if it was coming from the trees themselves, as if the forest was alive and speaking to them. The friends glanced at each other nervously, attributing it to the wind, but the whispering was too clear, too deliberate. It felt like a message meant for them. One of the friends, Rachel, stood up and walked toward the edge of the camp, squinting into the darkness, trying to make sense of the shadows. "I thought I saw something moving," she said, her voice trembling slightly, her eyes wide with fear. But when the others looked, there was nothing. Just the shadows of trees stretching into the night, playing tricks on their minds. They tried to dismiss it as their imagination, but the air felt wrong now, heavy with an unseen presence, a presence that seemed to be watching them. Suddenly, the whispering stopped, replaced by a sound that sent a chill through their spines. Footsteps, echoing in the stillness. Slow, deliberate footsteps, crunching in the leaves, each step measured and intentional. But there was no one around. The forest was empty, or so it seemed. The friends froze, their hearts pounding as they turned to face the direction of the sound, their breaths shallow and quick. The footsteps came closer, then stopped just beyond the campfire's light, as if someone, or something, was standing there, watching them, hidden in the shadows. The whispering began, soft at first, then growing louder and more insistent. The voices seemed to come from all directions, speaking in a language that was both ancient and terrifying. The campers' fear turned to panic as they realized they were not alone. Rachel, terrified but determined to prove there was nothing there, grabbed a flashlight and slowly walked toward the edge of the camp, the beam cutting through the darkness. As she reached the tree line, beam fell on something, a figure emerging from the shadows, its form barely visible but undeniably sinister. It moved with an unnatural grace, its eyes glowing with a malevolent light. Its face was obscured, hidden in the shadows, but the feeling of its presence was suffocating, like it was feeding off their fear. Rachel screamed and ran back to the camp, her flashlight flickering as she stumbled over the uneven ground. The others rushed to her side, eyes wide with panic. But when they looked back toward the trees, the figure was gone. There was nothing but the dense darkness of the forest. The decision to leave was made in a frenzy of fear. The forest seemed to close in around them. The trees twisted and contorted as if alive, and they couldn't shake the feeling that something was following them. Every step was a struggle against the oppressive darkness that threatened to consume them. As they hastily gathered their gear, the whispers returned, now louder, more insistent. They were no longer coming from the trees. They were coming from within the camp, as if the forest itself was speaking to them. The friends decided to abandon their tents and take refuge in the car. But as they made their way back down the trail, the night took on an even more menacing tone. The moon was hidden behind thick clouds, and the only sound was the crunch of their boots on the forest floor. But something was wrong. The forest seemed to be closing in on them. The path disappeared into a maze of shadows. The air grew thick with an unearthly presence, and the campers felt as if they were being suffocated by the very atmosphere. Their fear reached a fever pitch as they realized there was no escape. Then, without warning, the ground beneath them shifted. One of the friends, Ben, stepped on something soft, and before anyone could react, the earth opened up beneath him. He fell into the darkness, screaming as his friends reached out in horror. But the ground was too soft, too treacherous. Ben was gone. The remaining campers were left in a state of terror, their minds racing with thoughts of what could have taken him. Only the whispers, growing louder and more chaotic, filling their minds with a sense of dread that they couldn't escape. The darkness felt alive now, as though it was swallowing them whole. Rachel and Tom frantically dashed toward the car, the whispers haunting them, taunting them with every desperate step. The trees seemed to reach out with claw-like branches, shifting and creaking as if alive, grasping for them. The ground shifted beneath their feet, and every glance behind revealed shadowy figures darting between the trunks, too fast to catch with their eyes. When they finally reached the car, they didn't stop to question anything. They threw themselves into the vehicle and sped off, the sense of being hunted overwhelming them. Every second felt like an eternity, but as they drove, the whispers slowly faded into the distance. It was only when they reached the nearest town that they stopped to catch their breath, their bodies trembling, eyes wide with terror. The night had been long and harrowing, filled with shadows and whispers that seemed to follow them. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig had sent shivers down their spines, urging them to run faster, to escape the unseen menace that lurked in the darkness. The authorities were called, but when they returned to the site the next morning, the camp was abandoned. No sign of Ben, no trace of the strange figure, and no footprints leading in or out of the woods. It was as if the forest had swallowed them whole, erasing every trace of their presence. The investigators were baffled, their faces grim as they combed through the area, finding nothing but eerie silence and an unsettling sense of dread. It was as if they had never been there at all. The campsite stood empty, a ghostly reminder of the night's events, with tents and belongings left untouched, as if frozen in time. Rachel and Tom never returned to those woods. The memories were too painful, the fear too real. They avoided the forest, its dark canopy a constant reminder of what they had lost. They tried to forget what had happened, but the haunting memories never truly stopped. In the quiet moments when the world was still, they could hear them, soft, insistent, like a distant echo of their worst nightmares. They still hear them sometimes, soft, faint, calling from the distance, always just beyond their reach. The whispers seem to come from the very heart of the forest, a chilling reminder that some mysteries are never meant to be solved. And as for Ben, well, no one knows what happened to him. His disappearance became a local legend, a story whispered around campfires and in hushed tones, a cautionary tale for those who dared to venture too deep into the woods. Some say he was taken by the forest itself, consumed by whatever dark presence haunts those woods. The forest, they say, has a life of its own, a malevolent force that preys on the unwary. Others believe he's still out there, lost and wandering, waiting for someone else to find him. They say that on certain nights, when the moon is full and the wind is still, you can see a lone figure moving through the trees, a shadow searching for a way out. The truth, however, may be far more terrifying than anyone could ever imagine. For in those woods, reality and nightmare blur, and what is lost may never be found. The forest had left its mark on their souls, a dark reminder of the terror that lurked within. The warning was clear: never return to the Cascade Range. The eerie, foreboding presence of the forest was a constant reminder of the horrors that awaited those who dared to venture into its depths. The campers' final words were a chilling testament to the true terror they had experienced. Story 3. The weekend started off serene. 4 friends eager to escape their busy lives and camp in a secluded area of the forest. But as they ventured deeper, an unsettling feeling crept in. The trees seemed to whisper secrets, and shadows danced menacingly. As the sun set, the forest grew darker and more ominous. Strange noises echoed through the trees, and the group felt an eerie presence watching them. The oppressive silence was broken only by the sound of their own voices. That night, as they sat around the fire, a low growl rumbled from the depths of the forest, sending chills down their spines. The air grew thick with tension as they realized they were not alone. The friends nervously joked that it was probably a bear, but the growl didn't feel like anything they'd heard before. It was deep, primal, and seemed to be circling their camp. As they tried to ignore the strange noise, something far worse happened. The night had started off innocently enough. The group of friends had decided to escape the hustle and bustle of city life for a weekend of camping in the serene wilderness. They had spent the day hiking, laughing and sharing stories, feeling a sense of freedom that only nature could provide. As the sun set, they gathered around the campfire, roasting marshmallows and enjoying the warmth of the flames against the cool night air. The forest around them was alive with the sounds of nocturnal creatures, creating a symphony that added to the ambience of their adventure. But as the night grew darker, an unsettling feeling began to creep in. The usual sounds of the forest seemed to fade away, replaced by an eerie silence that hung heavy in the air. It was then that they heard it. A low, menacing growl that seemed to come from the very heart of the forest. The friends exchanged nervous glances, their laughter dying in their throats as the growl grew louder and more insistent. One of them, trying to lighten the mood, suggested it was just a bear looking for food. But deep down, they all knew that this growl was different. It was unlike anything they had ever heard before. A sound that seemed to resonate with an ancient primal energy. The growl seemed to move around them, circling their camp as if it was stalking them. The friends huddled closer together, their eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of movement. As the minutes ticked by, the tension became almost unbearable. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig sent their hearts racing. They tried to distract themselves with more jokes and stories, but the growl was always there, lurking just beyond the reach of the firelight. It was a constant reminder that they were not alone, that something was out there watching them. Then, without warning, the growl stopped. The sudden silence was almost more terrifying than the noise itself. The friends held their breath, straining to hear any sign of what might be out there. And then, from the darkness, came a sound that made their blood run cold. The unmistakable sound of footsteps, slow and deliberate, moving towards their camp. Panic set in as they realized that whatever was out there was getting closer. They scrambled to their feet, grabbing anything they could use as a weapon. The fire, which had once been a source of comfort, now seemed like a beacon, drawing the unknown creature towards them. They could feel its presence, a malevolent force that seemed to be closing in on them from all sides. Just when they thought they couldn't take it anymore, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was a park ranger, flashlight in hand, who had heard their voices and come to investigate. Relief washed over them as they realized they were safe, but the memory of that growl would haunt them for the rest of their lives. The forest, they knew, held secrets that were better left undisturbed. Whispers filled the air, growing louder and more insistent. The group huddled together, their fear palpable as they tried to make sense of the disembodied voices. At first it was barely audible, just a soft rustling sound in the trees. But soon, the whispers became clearer. They weren't random words, but phrases, creeping closer to their camp with each passing moment. You shouldn't have come. You shouldn't have come. Leave now or you'll never leave at all. Terrified, the group looked around but saw nothing. The forest seemed to close in around them, the trees towering like silent sentinels. The air grew colder, and the once comforting sounds of nature now felt ominous. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig sent shivers down their spines. They had ventured into these woods seeking adventure, but now they were trapped in a nightmare. The whispers were relentless, echoing in their minds, making it hard to think clearly. Panic began to set in, and they knew they had to make a decision quickly. The campfire, which had been a source of warmth and comfort, now seemed to cast sinister shadows. The flickering flames danced in the wind, creating shapes that played tricks on their eyes. Each member of the group felt the weight of the situation pressing down on them. They exchanged worried glances, silently questioning if they should heed the warnings of the whispers. But where would they go? The forest was vast and unfamiliar, and the darkness was quickly enveloping them. One of them pulled out a map, hands trembling as they tried to make sense of their location. The map, once a symbol of their planned adventure, now seemed like a cruel joke. The paths they had marked out were no longer clear, and the landmarks they had noted seemed to have vanished. It was as if the forest itself was conspiring against them, shifting and changing to keep them trapped. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, and the message was clear: leave now, or you'll never leave at all. Fear gripped their hearts as they scanned their surroundings, hoping to catch a glimpse of whatever was tormenting them. But the forest remained eerily silent, save for the whispers. It was as if the very air was alive with malevolent intent. They could feel eyes watching them, though they saw no one. The sense of being hunted was overwhelming, and they knew they couldn't stay there much longer. The decision was made. They had to leave, and they had to leave now. Hastily, they began to pack their belongings, their movements frantic and uncoordinated. Every second felt like an eternity, and the whispers seemed to mock their efforts. You shouldn't have come. You shouldn't have come. The words echoed in their minds, driving them to the brink of madness. As they gathered their gear, they couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that something was lurking just beyond the edge of the firelight, waiting for the right moment to strike. With their belongings hastily packed, they set off into the forest, flashlights cutting through the oppressive darkness. The path ahead was uncertain, and every step felt like a gamble. The whispers followed them, growing fainter, but never truly disappearing. The forest seemed to shift around them, the trees closing in, the shadows lengthening. It was a race against time, and they could only hope that they would find their way out before it was too late. As they moved deeper into the forest, their compass began to spin erratically, adding to their growing sense of dread. It was as if the very fabric of reality was unraveling around them. The whispers, though fainter, still echoed in their minds, a constant reminder of the danger they were in. They pressed on, driven by a desperate need to escape, but the forest seemed to stretch on endlessly, with no end in sight. Just when it seemed like all hope was lost, the first light of dawn began to break through the trees. The whispers faded, replaced by the sounds of morning birdsong. The forest, which had seemed so menacing in the darkness, now appeared almost serene. Exhausted and shaken, the group finally emerged from the woods, grateful to have escaped the nightmare. But the memory of the whispers would haunt them forever, a chilling reminder of the night they ventured into the unknown and barely made it out alive. The whispers turned to screams, and panic set in. The group ran blindly through the forest, their hearts pounding in their chests as they tried to escape the unseen terror. The sounds grew louder, more threatening, as they stumbled through the darkness. Suddenly, one of the friends, Jessica, stumbled and fell, screaming for help. She stood frozen by the fire, pointing toward the trees. Her voice trembled as she whispered, "There's something out there, watching us." They rushed outside to find nothing, no sign of any animal or person. But when they returned to their tents, they realized they weren't alone anymore. The sounds of footsteps followed them, and just as they reached the edge of the forest, a dark figure emerged from the shadows, its eyes glowing with malevolence. The group froze in fear, unable to move as the figure approached. Its limbs unnaturally long, and its face distorted in a way that no human face should be. The aftermath was devastating. The group was scattered, and the forest seemed to close in around them. They were trapped, with no way out and no hope of rescue. The whispers never stopped, and sometimes they'd hear them again, soft and distant, calling their names, reminding them of what they'd left behind in the woods. The next day, a search team was sent back to the campsite. They found nothing, no signs of struggle, no creature, and no footprints leading away from the camp. It was as if everything had disappeared. The forest was an enigma, a labyrinth of trees and shadows that seemed to shift and change with every passing moment. The group had ventured in with confidence, armed with maps, compasses, and a sense of adventure. But now those tools lay useless, broken and discarded on the forest floor. The compass, once a reliable guide, now spun aimlessly, as if mocking their plight. The maps, meticulously drawn, seemed to bear no resemblance to the terrain they found themselves in. It was as if the forest itself was alive, conspiring against them. Just days before, the forest had seemed like a paradise. The group had laughed and shared stories around a campfire, the flickering flames casting a warm glow on their faces. They had felt invincible, bonded by friendship and the thrill of the unknown. But now that camaraderie was a distant memory, replaced by fear and desperation. The forest, once a place of wonder, had become a prison. The search team, equipped with the latest technology and driven by a sense of duty, combed through the forest with flashlights and tracking devices. They called out the names of the missing, their voices echoing through the trees. The forest remained silent, its secrets hidden in the shadows. The searchers found no trace of the group, no discarded belongings, no signs of a struggle, nothing to indicate what had happened. It was as if the forest had swallowed them whole. The searchers' faces grew more worried with each passing hour. They had expected to find something, anything, that would give them a clue. But the forest offered no answers. It was as if the group had vanished into thin air. The searchers could feel the weight of the forest's silence pressing down on them, a constant reminder of their failure to find their friends. As the days turned into weeks, hope began to fade. The forest, shrouded in mist and mystery, seemed to mock their efforts. The whispers that the group had heard now seemed to haunt the searchers as well, a constant reminder of the forest's eerie presence. The search was eventually called off, the missing declared lost to the wilderness. But the forest remained, a silent witness to the events that had transpired, its secrets locked away in the shadows. In the aftermath, a memorial was set up at the edge of the forest. Friends and family gathered to pay their respects, leaving flowers and mementos in honor of the missing. The forest stood as a somber backdrop, its trees whispering in the wind. The community was left to grapple with the loss, the unanswered questions, and the haunting memories of those who had ventured into the woods and never returned. The forest, with its secrets and shadows, remained a place of both beauty and terror, a reminder of the thin line between adventure and tragedy. Some locals whispered that the forest was cursed, that others had gone missing there in the past, never to return. The group realized too late that they had stumbled into a place of ancient evil, and there was no escape from its grasp. The friends didn't speak about the event again, but the memories stayed with them.